WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Political observers have their minds on the city elections that just happened this past week. But looking ahead 1 year, we'll have statewide races. That's true for the governor's seat. A number of people across the political spectrum are vying for the spot. So who are the Republicans leading the race right now? And what are they running on? Producer Sam Corey spoke to longtime Michigan Republican strategist Jeff Timmer to find out.
There are a lot of folks running for governor in the state as a Republican. Is there a frontrunner?
There are two frontrunners. The fundraising reports that came out this week really separated the candidates running. There are two candidates clearly lapping the field, and maybe I could say there are two and a half, and I'll explain. John James, by virtue of his small dollar mail, email, and text fundraising, was able to pull in $1.4 million. Now, he has a high burn rate. He didn't net $1.4 million, but he has more than $2 million cash on hand. Mike Cox, the former attorney general, who hasn't been in office since 2010, he's put in his own money to the extent of $3.5 million. And really, those two candidates are, I think it's safe to say right now, unless something significant changes, like Donald Trump endorsement of a different candidate, but otherwise the nomination for the Republicans is almost certain to be between one of those two candidates.
Okay, well, so then who's the half candidate?
The half candidate is a current Republican leader in the Senate, Eric Nesbitt, who also, he has more than $2 million cash on hand. He showed regression in his fundraising. His first report filed earlier this year surprised everybody, including me, and he had more than $2 million. But this time around, he regressed back to $400,000. What that tells me is he got the low-hanging fruit, and now he's slogging through. That kind of $400,000 haul is not going to be enough to compete. He has more cash on hand than Tom Leonard or the rest of the field that are behind him, so that's why I give him the half. Michigan still has a public financing option, and both of those candidates have applied for the $1 million of public financing that they apparently qualify for due to the number of small dollar donors that they have so far.
I want to stop there for a second because I think that's really interesting. I'm not sure everybody knows that. So there's public financing dollars that candidates can get access to. What do they need to do to qualify for that? And I'm assuming even if they do qualify, they can still raise money on their own privately.
Correct. And the public financing is something that's been around for decades, and it's utilized very little now because it sets certain fundraising caps and restrictions. In order to qualify, you have to first hit a threshold, and it has to be comprised of a certain minimum number of individual donors. There's some trigger in state law. When a candidate accepts public financing, they also accept certain restrictions. They can't raise more than, and they can't spend more than X. So if John James and Eric Nesbitt fill out all the forms correct, and in fact do meet the qualifications for public financing, that gives Nesbitt another $1 million shot in the arm, and that allows him to kind of slog along and stay in the hunt should there be a big stumble somewhere along the way.
I want to get into the nuances and the differences between these candidates, but one of the things that we're talking about a lot is just cash, is dollars and dollars on hand. Why does that matter so much?
Getting elected requires two things. It takes money and everything else. It costs to get a message out, to build an organization, to build the infrastructure, to do the retail campaigning, and to do the voter contact. You're running statewide with 4.5 million votes expected to be cast, a little north of that. You know, you've got to spend money on traditional television advertising, digital advertising, emails, social media, all the things that cost money to reach your voters, mail, to get your message out. And so I caution the folks, the reporters who cover this, and also the listeners who are trying to analyze this, not just to look at the horse race number. One, like I said with John James earlier, $1.4 million raised. That's great, but it was less than $700,000 net to his cash on hand. And so that's what you need to look at, is how much cash these candidates are going to have as they kind of hit the crescendo of the race next spring and summer before the August primary.
So cash matters because it allows you to amplify your voice. It allows you to get on other platforms. It allows you to advertise a lot, particularly TV advertising. You talked about John James's small donations. I guess I'm wondering how much that matters because it's showing that, hey, more people are participating in this campaign. If it's just one big donor, then it's a lot less people who might be voting for somebody. How much does that matter?
There's a lot of attention paid to that in coverage, but I think in reality there's very little that it matters. Whether a candidate like Rick Snyder back in the 2010 primary, who self-financed his entire campaign and won, didn't go out and raise money from donors, especially small dollar donors. The money spends just the same wherever it comes from.
Okay. I guess the last question on this is about, before we get to the candidates themselves, is about attention. The big thing that I'm seeing, at least in New York City's mayoral race, but you see it also with Donald Trump's victory over Kamala Harris in 2024, which is essentially not necessarily the amount of money someone's raising, but how much attention they can get. The one thing that President Trump is very good at is getting people's attention. The one thing that Zoran Mamdani is really good at on the left is getting people's attention. It's getting out, it's getting in front of people's faces, it's being on social media, it's being where other folks are and being good at somehow getting folks' attention, not necessarily with dollars, though it doesn't mean that they're irrelevant, but it's more about utilizing the platforms that are available and trying to connect with folks that way, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, what have you. What do you make of that perspective? And is that playing any role in this Republican race for governor?
Well, first, Sam, I think you're spot on. I said winning takes money and everything else, and it's that everything else you're talking about there. My statement shouldn't be construed to mean the candidate with the most money is most likely to win. You just need a fundraising threshold in order to be a viable candidate. But if one candidate has $5 million and the other candidate has $6 million, both probably have a reasonable chance to win. So it's not just the most money, but you have to be able to have a certain amount of money to get that critical mass and be a viable candidate for the long haul. Somebody like Mamdani in New York or Donald Trump getting attention, yes, that certainly, if you can catch that lightning in a bottle and be able to command the microphones and the cameras and the attention and go to people where they are, like Mamdani has done in New York, really driving this with far fewer resources initially than his opponents, a reasonable level of financial support. And then he was able to parlay his genuineness and his personality that came across in their social media. It was really a TikTok candidacy, and it was strategically designed to compensate for having fewer financial resources. And not every candidate can do that. And so far, the social media game of any of the Republicans is trapped in the early 2000s.
Okay.
It's pretty archaic.
Yeah.
It's pretty clumsy, and none of them are good at it.
So then what is the dollar threshold in the Republican gubernatorial candidate race? Like, what do they need to hit to be viable?
I think in this one, a candidate can't see their way past $5 million that they have available to spend in 2026. They're not likely to be a force and a factor in the race for the long haul.
This is The Metro on WDET, Detroit Public Radio. I'm producer Sam Corey speaking with Jeff Timmer, a Republican political strategist. Jeff, let's talk about these candidates a little bit. You named a couple that are, really the front runners here. We got John James, Eric Nesbitt, and Mike Cox. Seems like John James probably has the most name brand value right now. Most people know him. Of course, he's run in some major elections and is a congressperson. What separates these people?
Right now, what separates them is really name ID. John James ran two failed races for the U.S. Senate before he was elected to Congress by the skin of his teeth back in 2022. He's been elected twice out of a largely, almost entirely McLean County congressional district, but he has spent and had spent on his behalf far more than $100 million since 2018. And so he has much more recent name ID than Mike Cox, who was the Attorney General between 2002 and 2010 when he ran for governor and lost in the Republican primary to Rick Snyder, who went on to win and serve 2 terms as governor. And so Mike Cox has some latent name ID. There's some older voters who might remember Mike, but he has to kind of reintroduce himself because it's been a decade and a half since he's run for any office. Mike Cox has been able to interject his own personal money into his governor's campaign. That's something that he didn't have when he ran for governor back in 2010. And then Eric Nesbitt, with his platform as the leader for the Republicans in the Senate, even though they're in the minority for the first time in 40 years under his leadership, he has a platform where he works to raise money for the Senate, the legislative candidates, as well as himself, meeting with donors and business leaders and leaders all across the state. And so he's been able to establish a platform and a fundraising network that he took advantage of to raise his $2.5 million that he's come up with so far.
Republican voters care about issues. I asked you about the issues, and you were talking a little bit about sort of their backgrounds. I mean, is it more just about their aesthetic, their support for Donald Trump? There was recently a candidate debate. A lot of the candidates who are there at least supported school choice and were critical of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. What are the issues that are coming up, if any, in these campaigns at this point?
I would contest the statement that the Republican voters care about issues.
Okay.
In this day and age, in 2026, the Republican voters in the Republican Party is far different than it was pre-2016. Issues matter a lot less. They care more about the support for Donald Trump, the support for Trump's positions against immigration, et cetera, the retribution, taking it to the libs, all of that stuff
Owning the libs,
matters
sure.
a lot more. And I think that gives a candidate like Mike Cox I think he's in a very enviable position for a candidate because he's an insider outsider, if that makes sense. He was a longtime Republican Party insider and office holder, but now he doesn't hold office. And he can say, if you like the mess in Washington, John James is your guy. Most voters, Republicans, Democrats, everybody says Washington's a mess, Lansing is a mess. I don't like anybody from here. And so he can say the same thing about Eric Nesbitt. If you like Lansing, he's your guy. But if you like Donald Trump, I'm your guy. Now, everybody is going to try to say they're very Trumpy, but Mike has the money and the luxury of not holding office and having to ever take a position contrary to Donald Trump. Now, where John James, the White House, Donald Trump, Speaker Mike Johnson, and the powers that be within the Republican Party in Washington do not want John James to run for governor. They want him to stay and defend his House seat, which is very likely to flip to the Democrats if he's not running. It's much easier to hold a seat by an incumbent than an open seat. And given the narrow margins in the House, that's the big concern for folks in Washington who are interested in advancing the Trump agenda.
We're going to come back to Republicanism and Republican flavor, Republican energy, depending on where you are in the state of Michigan and what is hot or where. But I do want to hold on John James for a second because he is, it seems at this point, the leader, and he does have a lot of name recognition, and he does generally have support from Donald Trump. There was a candidate event earlier this week where they debated the issues and topics. John James did not show up. I've known people trying to interview John James. It can be quite difficult to get him on the line. Is he known for not coming to events? Does this matter? Is this affecting his popularity? What is the signal of that?
Since he announced his campaign earlier this year, in so many ways, both on the campaign trail and in his official role as a member of Congress, he's seemingly gone into the witness protection program. You can't find too many John James sightings in the wild, and that is very out of the ordinary for a candidate running for any office. They show up everywhere. The other candidates are every day posting, their social media is filled with, I'm here in the morning, I'm here in the afternoon, I'm here in the evening, I'm out, shaking hands and kissing babies. And John James is just, he announced, and it's kind of gone quiet. He's been raising the money, doing things presumably behind the scenes, but it's very counterintuitive to run such a quiet campaign because it has allowed the narrative that he's distant, detached, unengaged. Is he really serious about running to kind of build up among the Republican grassroots activists. And so it feeds into does he want it? Should I support him? the other candidates are really leaning into his invisibility on the trail to try to leverage any initial support he had.
Do you have any understanding of why this is? Like why he is rather invisible?
No, it is a conundrum. I have no idea why they have chosen to strategically, because there's no other way to look at it. It's not accidental that they announced for governor more than, like 10 months ago and have really not made any peep since. It's been very, very quiet. His silence this year has allowed other candidates to step in and fill the void, where if he had come out maybe with a more active, energized, traditional kind of campaign, he could have frozen out a candidate, say like Mike Cox, or never allowed Eric Nesbitt to get any of the traction to the extent he has this year.
I only got a couple minutes left here, but I do want to ask you two questions. One is about that question of republicanism and Republican flavor and conservatism. How does it change based on where you are in the state? Are there things that people are looking for that's really different in a city, a suburb, an exurb, and the UP if you're a Republican voter? Does that change a lot?
There is perhaps a geographic difference in what is the most important thing, how a voter decides to support a candidate. But I think the largest divide in our politics and within Republican politics, too, is really education attainment has become the biggest demarcation.
That's true for voters in general, as education attainment.
Whether voters, complete high school and go on to any education, but beyond that or not, more educational attainment. The less likely now in 2025 and 2026 a voter is to support a Republican. But even within the Republican ranks, those who have some college or college degrees or degrees beyond college tend to be less supportive of Donald Trump, less supportive of the MAGA agenda. And so that's the real divide. It's educational attainment. It's not even income.
Okay, and so last question for you here, Jeff. I don't have a lot of time, but what are Republicans going to have to do to beat independent candidate, Mayor Mike Duggan, or any of the Democrats running?
The math, because of Mike Duggan's viable third-party candidacy, I question whether he could ever muster the wherewithal to win in a general election. But it's been forever, if ever, that we've seen in Michigan a viable, independent, non-aligned candidate. People are still trying to figure out who Mike Duggan's support hurts the most. Does it, if he takes votes out of Detroit, it certainly hurts Jocelyn Benson next November, who is almost certain to be the Democratic nominee, or does he take support from those college-educated or beyond high school-educated Republicans who are less likely to support Donald Trump or a Donald Trump-aligned candidate, even though they're traditional Republicans. A lot of them have been the folks who have supported financially Mike Duggan's campaign so far. So he's taking some support from Democrats, a good deal of support from Republicans, and I think Mike Duggan's candidacy complicates the analysis of this race, who he's going to ultimately pull more votes from. And I think we still don't know the answer to that.
Political strategist Jeff Timmer speaking with producer Sam Corey. Jeff spoke about public campaign finance dollars. For clarity, to receive the funds, candidates must raise at least $75,000 in qualifying contributions from individual donors, and they need to limit their campaign spending to $2 million. This is WDET-FM, Detroit Public Radio, your connection to news, music, and conversation. And this is the Metro. Stay with us.